Welcome to the Breakup Recovery Podcasts by your host, Barbara Stevens. Discover the wisdom and remarkable insights of Barbara Stevens, breakup recovery mentor, author, and public speaker. Barbara offers programs and solutions for any breakup so you can turn your life around, create lasting changes for the better, and embrace life again.
Welcome to Breakup Recovery Podcast. Thank you for joining me. I'm Barbara Stevens, and Breakup Recovery is a podcast helping you recover from your breakup. In this episode, I welcome Lisa Ahrens. Lisa, we will get more into what you do, but first tell me about your breakup.
Well, my breakup felt like a Hollywood movie, although not a very good one, I must say. So I was with my ex-husband for 16 years. And I was out of town visiting family when I received a text completely out of the blue that said, "I'm sorry to be such a coward leaving you this way, but I'm leaving you and leaving the state." And that was just the beginning. I actually never had contact with him again. He refused to respond to any text messages or emails and wouldn't pick up the phone. And once I got back to my home, which he had already vacated, I started doing some digging and found out that he'd been living a double life. And in the midst of all of that, had put us about $100,000 in debt, and which he left me with, and even found out that he had another wife. So he had committed felony bigamy. So it was quite the ending, I must say.
Wow, that is a huge shock. Lisa, did you have children with your ex-husband?
Thank goodness, no. We had dogs that he had locked up in the basement when he left. And I shudder to think what would have happened if there'd been kids that he'd left behind.
Lisa, what do you think the catalyst was for him to finally, end the relationship in a fairly dramatic way?
Great question. So I kind of had to put some pieces together. You know, I called it like a marital autopsy with no body, where I had to sort of try to figure out what made the most sense. And from what I can see is all of this started when he had difficulty with work and difficulty finding work. And he sort of manufactured a job and fabricated an income. And I believe that's where quite a bit of the debt came from. And it looks like he started to sort of get into an addiction and shame spiral. And what eventually happened was the house of cards that he had created was going to collapse. It was completely inevitable. And he married this other woman who was moving to Africa within a few weeks. And I think he needed an exit. He needed out away from me because once I discovered everything, he knew that, you know, things would not be okay. And it looked like he wanted out of the country as well to try to avoid the repercussions of his actions.
So he left the country with the second wife, so to speak, and go to Africa?
He did. Now, I actually had found out where he was and found out who she was, and so contacted the police there. And so he was actually arrested for bigamy. I mean, ended up escaping with just a slap on the wrist, but they actually were in Africa right before the divorce was final. He came back for court. I don't know what happened after that. I didn't keep up with his whereabouts.
That is such a strange story. Nothing against you, but not very often would someone break up with you the way he did and then have no contact whatsoever with you during the whole process.
I know. It was one of those, when it first happened to me, I felt completely alone because it was so different than anything that I had ever experienced. And that's actually what prompted me to start writing and sharing my story, was because I didn't want other people that might be going through the same thing to feel alone. And I was shocked and dismayed how many people have contacted me in the years since who have experienced similar. And I find a lot of them don't talk about it because there's such shame surrounding it, of how I must have been so terrible, so bad of a spouse to have been abandoned this way and to have been left in this way.
When often it's really got nothing to do with you, has it?
Exactly.
It's all their issues. It's all the way they cope with things.
Exactly. And that's the message I try to get out. It's when somebody's leaving like that, and it's not an abusive situation, when somebody's leaving like that, it tells you a whole lot about them and about their cowardice, and that they would much rather run than face things.
It's the way they deal with their issues, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
So you started your blog, Lessons from the End of a Marriage. Tell me more about that blog and why you started that.
So I actually started writing right when all of this happened, just in a journal. I had never written before other than for school. I'm a math teacher in my day life. And I started writing just as my own sort of therapy. And as I started dealing with the attorneys and with law enforcement, time and time again, people kept telling me, this needs to be out there. Like, this is a story that needs to be shared. And so I actually started writing a book at that time that's also called Lessons from the End of a Marriage. And as I was still sort of crafting that, that's when I started the blog, which has now been, 5.5 years ago at this point. And it started out sort of as my own therapy, but it's served its purpose there. And now it's helping others that, are experienced or have experienced similar.
And what sort of articles can people find in your blog?
Oh my goodness, I write about so many things. I write quite a bit about divorce and surviving it, but some of it is more just general life, not even just divorce related. Overall, I talk a lot about abandonment. I talk about emotional abuse, gaslighting, but I really focus on how to overcome all of that. And I really focus on people taking the responsibility for their own well-being and their own happiness, regardless of what has happened to them.
When you talked about gaslighting, can you explain what that means?
Sure. Gaslighting is a particularly horrendous form of emotional abuse. And what makes it so awful is you're not aware of it often when it's happening. It's not the overt, yelling, screaming, controlling. It's very subversive, and it's so, so difficult to break away from because it completely messes with your sense of reality. So examples from my own situation is, I would be told that something was true when it wasn't, or vice versa. And my ex would go to the extreme of creating documents to support what he said. And the one that I still have, and I held on to this because he took everything with him when he left, but I have this one. He changed our car insurance information that he had in his vehicle where he was with the other wife. He changed the car insurance information to remove my name. And so I have the PDF of what it really looked like and then what was found in his car. And that's an example of gaslighting where he's taking and twisting reality and making me feel crazy in the meantime.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give to someone who is going through a breakup, and how do they rebuild their lives?
Well, first, be patient. It's not going to be just a quick, flick of the switch. And I think one thing people struggle with is they want to feel better right now. They want to feel better today. And they get down on themselves when it's not happening on this timeline that they've created for themselves. And I always like to tell people that healing does not speak calendar. It happens, but it's going to sort of happen at its own pace. One of the big things that I really advocate is gratitude. It's amazing how simple it is, and yet how incredibly powerful it is. Because if you find yourself kind of getting in a pity party place, it's hard to move forward. It can really keep you stuck. And if you can focus on even just one thing every day that you're thankful for, and you write it down and give it some power, it starts to build and it starts to train your mind to focus on the good and not so much all the bad.
Because that can be so easy to do, can't it?
Oh my goodness, yes, it can. So, and I even recommend if somebody's going to journal, journaling is an amazing, amazing tool, but it can also become just kind of like a dump book if you're not careful and can kind of keep you stuck. And so I like to recommend what I call a journal in 3 places. And so basically you divide your journal into 3 sections. And the first section is where you just do that purging. It's just where you get out all of the yuck and the past and the pain. And then from there, you move on to the middle section, which is sort of the present. And so that can be what you're thankful for in the current moment. It can be some problem solving that you have going on, kind of that more practical side of what's happening in your day-to-day right now. And then ending with the future. And that's your hopes and your dreams. And they don't have to feel attainable right now. It's okay. But just to keep yourself thinking forward and keeping that hope alive. And so that 3 parts helps you go from the past and the yuck, but it keeps you moving forward.
That's great advice. Tell me more about your How to Thrive guide for after divorce.
So, oh my goodness, there's so many ways that you can thrive after divorce. I think one of the biggest things that people get stuck in is all we know is what we've known. And so they think it's never going to be the same again. And they equate that with, I'm never going to be happy again. And I think what's so important to recognize is, yeah, it's not going to be the same again. And that's okay. Different can be better, in fact. And to start to, keep your eye on those possibilities instead of focusing so much on what's been lost. One other tidbit that I like to share is recommending that people sign up for something with a finish line. And it can be a literal finish line. You can sign up, for your first 5K, or you can sign up for a marathon. But it also can be anything that has a defined ending. And take some effort and energy and intention to reach that. So I've known people who have enrolled in a degree program or have signed up for some sort of class. But what's so good about that during divorce is it helps to focus your energy on something positive and something that you have control over. And it also is a tangible end, because divorce doesn't have that end that you know when you've reached it, a big sign that says, congratulations, you've made it. It's, I wish it did.
Yes, I think everybody wishes that there was an end line.
Yes, or you're like, okay, that's over and done with. I never have to think about it again. But doing something that does have that defined end helps to build your confidence that you can make it, even when the end isn't so easy to see.
I guess it's also important to have balance in your life, isn't there?
Oh my goodness, yes. It's so easy to get either overly focused on the divorce and perhaps your ex, or some people sort of go the other direction and they spend all their energy distracting themselves from it. And it is important to have balance. You've got to spread your energy equally to everywhere that it needs to go.
Lisa, if people want to find out more about what you do or read your blogs or connect with you and see what else you offer, where can they find this information?
So probably the best place to find me would be at my blog, which is Lessons from the End of a Marriage. And you can also find me on Twitter, and my handle is Still Learning, 2, letter B. So still learning to be, because I believe that we are all always learning.
I'll put the details to your blog on the summary of this podcast. Lisa, thank you for coming on to Breakup Recovery Podcast and sharing your stories about recovering, how to thrive and how to find more balance after a breakup. And I'm sure that your information and the stories that you have to tell will help people recover after their breakup. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode number 104. What do you do when you get a breakup text out of the blue from your husband of 16 years with Lisa Ahrens? I know that my mouth dropped to the floor when Lisa told her breakup story. I can see how she related her breakup to a movie gone bad. She had no idea her husband was living a different life, where he fabricated a job, an income, and therefore putting them into debt, which she had to take over when he left the country with his other wife. And then for him to refuse to have any contact, it would be a nightmare. But Lisa found solace and comfort in writing her stories, which then turned into her blog, where not only did she help herself, she is helping others that are going through a divorce, separation and a breakup. I've put all Lisa's contact details in the summary so you can look up her blog and her books. I hope you took something away from this episode, and if you think the information shared in this podcast could help someone you know, I hope you will share it with them or tell them about the podcast so they too can get some ideas, strategies and tips to help them through their own breakup. They can download the podcast in iTunes, iHeartRadio and my website. I am a breakup recovery mentor and I have been through my own divorce. I know the heartache you are feeling. I know the despair some of you are feeling. I work with clients one-on-one to get them back on track after their breakups. So if that sounds like something you would like to explore, please reach out by my website or message me on Facebook and take advantage of my free 30-minute sounding board session where we can have a chat and see if I can help you. And the last thing I'd like to say is, be gentle on yourself. You deserve happiness.
If you would like to hear previous Breakup Recovery podcasts, visit barbarastevens.com.au. Connect with Barbara Stevens on social media with Barbara Stevens Breakup Recovery Mentor on Facebook and at You'll Be Okay on Twitter. Read further blogs, view webinar replays, and download your free ebook, 3 Easy Steps to Surviving Your Breakup, and much more at barbarastevens.com.au.